Welcome back and welcome to part 2. Our first task in part 2 is to insert a row above row 7. To do that, we click on row 7 and then in the Home tab in the cells group over on the right, we choose the drop arrow below Insert and choose Insert Sheet Rows. And Excel will insert a row above the selected row. So we can put a tick in that particular task. Our next task, insert a column before column H. To do that, I choose column H and then I go to the Insert command again, click the drop arrow and insert sheet columns, and this time it inserts a column to the left of the selected column. Let's put a tick in that particular task. Notice that the rows and the columns are still there. Nothing has changed in terms of their identification, and the formulas that we entered earlier have all been adjusted in terms of the cell addresses. The next task is to change the orientation to landscape. Very simple. We go to the page layout group in the page setup the page layout command in the page setup group and click the drop arrow next to orientation and we change it to landscape. Now you'll notice here that the actual sheet doesn't change in appearance. However, the printing of this spreadsheet would print in landscape. Let's change it back to portrait and we'll tick that task. Our next task is to center the worksheet horizontally and vertically so that when it prints, it will print in exactly the middle of the page. To do that, we go to the page setup group again and we click the drop arrow below margins, and then we go down to custom margins, and you'll see here there are commands waiting to be ticked: center on page, horizontally and vertically, and you'll be given a demonstration here in the visual as to how that will occur. So we'll click OK and put a tick in the task. Check the spelling. Now what I'm going to do here is make a deliberate spelling mistake. I'm going to take the A out of Peaches to see how Excel handles the spell checker. So to check the spelling, I press F7, the same as I do in Microsoft Word. And what it does, it looks at the word fruiterers, which is not in the dictionary. It thinks that we want to have written fritterers, but that's not the case. So I can add fruiterers to the dictionary, and we'll also ignore any other situations where the word fruiterers appears. The spell checking is complete, but it hasn't picked up the spelling mistake in the word peaches because there is a word pesh in the dictionary. So we'll click OK and we will add the A back into peaches to make it correct. And just to prove the point, I will take the E out of produce and we'll spell check again, F7. This time it does find the spelling mistake because produce without an E is an incorrect spelling. So we will click change. And it puts the E back into produce and says the spell check is complete. Let's tick that one. Our next task, rename sheet 1 as first quarter. I'm going to right click on sheet 1 and rename the sheet to first quarter. And when I press enter, that is exactly what Excel does for me. Tick. Insert a new worksheet. Probably the easiest part of all is to insert a new worksheet, because I just need to click the plus sign next to the previous sheet and it inserts that new blank worksheet. Let's click back on first quarter and tick our task. Now it says create a column chart to show the produce, the months and the data. A chart is simply a visual representation of the trend in data, but again I need to invoke the golden rule of all computing: select then do. So I'm going to select all of the information here and I'm going to go to the insert command, and over here in the charts group I'll click the drop arrow next to the column charts and I'll insert a 2D column. And there we are, it's inserted a 2D column for me using the information that I selected. I can drag that chart around and drop it wherever I wish. At this stage we'll delete the chart. Change the width of column D so the contents fit within. Now in column D I notice that the XYZ fruiterers are outside. So what I'm going to do is to double click on column D, and there it changes the width. And what I did was to point at the divider line between the D and the column to the right and double click when I see the double headed arrow. Let's click away and tick. Right align the data in column D. Well, we've already done that in part 1, but let's just check what appears in the alignment group, because when I click on column D it says in the alignment group that the data is already aligned right. And at this stage you'll notice, just before we close part 2, that as I hover over buttons in the ribbon, that I will be told what will happen if I click the mouse. Thank you so much for watching this part. Remember, part 3 will follow, and now there is a little quiz coming up just to confirm your learning in part 2.